The galaxy had long regarded humanity as inconsequential, a minor species dwelling on a backwater planet. Barely a curiosity in the eyes of the dominant interstellar civilizations that span hundreds of systems with fleets of unimaginable size and firepower, their empires held together by centuries of conquest, diplomacy, and technology so advanced it was indistinguishable from what humans call magic. Yet none of them had ever truly studied the humans closely, dismissing them as primitive, limited in both intellect and capability. A species that could not possibly compete on equal footing with the collective might of the galactic councils, the great alien dynasties, or the merciless corporate militias that carved the stars into zones of control, a misjudgment that would soon cost them dearly. Though at the moment, on the edge of the Orion Spur, where human colonies had quietly expanded over decades, life continued in its ordinary cadence, the bustling cities on Earth, Mars, and the orbital habitats humming with activity, research labs brimming with experiments that to the outside I seem mundane, but were the nucleus of something far more formidable, as Admiral Nathan Harper observed the latest simulations on the bridge of the Vanguard-class carrier Intrepid, his sharp eyes scanning streams of data that projected enemy fleet movements, resource allocation, and predicted outcomes of various conflict scenarios, all of which fed into humanity's secret strategy, one that had been painstakingly developed in the shadows of galactic ignorance. Every scientist, every military tactician, every intelligence operative working toward the same goal with meticulous precision, the development of the Chiron Protocol, a system of adaptive combat intelligence that could analyze not just the hardware and formations of alien fleets, but their culture, psychology, and underlying decision-making algorithms, effectively allowing humans to predict and manipulate the reactions of species that believed themselves superior. And as Harper watched the holographic display flicker, showing the patrol routes of the Syndic Dominion's frigates approaching the outer colonies, he knew that what humans had built in secret for decades would soon be tested in the crucible of real combat. And yet the challenge was not merely technological. It was philosophical, for humanity's advantage was not brute force alone, but the ability to combine creativity, intuition, and unpredictability. Qualities the rigid, hierarchical alien empires could never fully comprehend, their battle doctrines rooted in centuries of repetition and observation, and in that reliance on predictability lay their vulnerability, as Lieutenant Commander Elise Morales, stationed at the tactical control node, cross-referenced energy signatures with movement vectors, noting how the Dominion strike squadrons adhered to patterns that seemed optimal to them, but were in fact ripe for exploitation. She tapped A. Command, rerouting a cloaked reconnaissance probe through a narrow asteroid field, its trajectory invisible to conventional sensors, providing data that would allow Harper to orchestrate a counterstrike that no alien intelligence could anticipate. Meanwhile on Earth, Dr. Henry Liu and his team of xenobiologists and cognitive engineers refined the neurological interface that allowed human commanders to share insights instantaneously across vast distances, the interface blending AI-assisted predictions with human intuition in a way that magnified every decision, a synthesis that no alien mind could mimic because it relied on chaotic, creative spark inherent to humans. And as Liu adjusted the neural matrix parameters, he noted with satisfaction that latency had been reduced to milliseconds, effectively synchronizing the thoughts of commanding officers across light years, a breakthrough that would allow coordinated strikes with precision unmatched in the galaxy while in orbit above Jupiter's moon Europa. Captain Rachel Kim oversaw the final preparations for the deployment of adaptive drones designed to mimic alien ship signatures and behavioral patterns, creating decoys that could infiltrate fleets undetected, sow confusion, and manipulate enemy formations, each drone acting independently yet in concert, a distributed intelligence that mirrored human strategic thinking, but faster, more flexible, and able to adjust dynamically to changing circumstances. As the first, reports of Syndic reconnaissance vessels entering human space reached command nodes across multiple star systems. Panic quietly spread to the Dominion's lower echelons, for while the High Council remained confident that humans were incapable of mounting a real challenge, the subtle anomalies detected by their advanced sensors, slight deviations in ship formations, unexpected energy readings, and communications that suggested coordination beyond expected capabilities, hinted at something that did not fit their models, yet they could not articulate what. Their confidence a brittle veneer over an emerging fear they were too proud to acknowledge openly. In the midst of this, Harper convened a secure hollow conference with the heads of human strategic divisions, the council of commanders and scientists who had been instrumental in designing the Chiron Protocol, each participant contributing insights in real time, from weapon calibration to interstellar logistics, from morale management to predictive diplomacy, understanding that the true test of humanity's secret advantage lay not only in defeating enemy fleets, but in maintaining cohesion and adaptability in the face of unprecedented challenges. And as the conference drew to a close, plans solidified for a coordinated series of operations that would stretch from the asteroid belt to the outer rim colonies, each maneuver calculated to exploit the Syndic Dominion's assumptions, baiting them into overextending, isolating squadrons, and ultimately forcing them into situations where their conventional superiority became irrelevant. While far from human-controlled space, Dominion Admiral Sarnak, a seasoned veteran with decades of conquest under his command, reviewed the same data, noting anomalies and inconsistencies, his prideful nature preventing him from admitting uncertainty. Yet a nagging unease settled in, as if an invisible hand were rearranging the stars, subtly undermining everything he had been trained to expect. He ordered additional scans, attempted to predict human intentions based on historical engagement patterns. But the humans did not act according to history. They acted with the kind of ingenuity and unpredictability that left even his best tacticians scrambling for explanations on the ground. In the human colonies, civilians remained unaware of the storm gathering in the void, life continuing in its ordinary rhythms. Yet their engineers, miners, and administrators were all part of the hidden machinery of preparation, maintaining supply lines, energy grids, and communications infrastructure, ensuring that when the first blows fell, humanity's response would be swift, overwhelming, and precise, every citizen unknowingly contributing to a defense system that combined ingenuity, courage, and adaptability on a scale the galaxy had never seen. And as the first skirmishes began near the edge of Alpha Centauri, Dominion frigates found themselves outmaneuvered by unseen forces, encountering ambushes, electronic warfare, and predictive countermeasures that seemed impossible to react to, every failed assault feeding into the Chiron Protocol's growing dataset, refining humanity's response in real time, turning each engagement into a learning opportunity that magnified human advantage. While news of unexpected defeats reached the Dominion High Council, disbelief mingled with fury, for their models had predicted that humans could at best delay defeat, not inflict significant losses. Yet across multiple systems, human task forces executed operations with surgical precision, targeting command ships, disrupting supply chains, and sowing confusion in ways that alien strategists could not fathom. And as Harper issued orders to deploy the next phase of their campaign, the scale and coordination of human ingenuity became apparent. Entire fleets moving in synchrony, using stealth, deception, and predictive tactics to outmaneuver opponents who had once considered themselves invincible. And in the observation decks of alien capitals, analysts recorded data that defied logic, patterns emerging that suggested humans were not merely reacting, but anticipating, shaping the battlefield according to a plan that no one outside of humanity could see. And as the first messages of surrender and retreat began to trickle through Dominion channels, the galaxy started to realize that the humans were not what they seemed, that their secret advantage, rooted in creativity, adaptability, and the Chiron Protocol's unprecedented synthesis of intelligence, was a force that could not be ignored, that would not be contained, and that in the cold vacuum of space, the underestimated species from Earth was poised to shock the entire galaxy, forever altering the balance of power, demonstrating that what had been dismissed as weakness was, in fact, humanity's greatest strength. And as Harper looked out across the bridge of the Intrepid, the stars reflecting in his eyes, he understood that the coming conflict would not merely be a war of ships and weapons, but revelation, the unveiling of a species that had honed its mind, its courage, and its ingenuity to a level that no galactic empire could anticipate. And when the full force of human strategy unfolded, the galaxy would finally comprehend the scale of its misjudgment, the cost of underestimating Earth, and the terrifying brilliance of humanity's secret advantage that had been hidden in plain sight, quietly growing, quietly preparing, until the moment it struck, leaving every observer, every rival, and every would-be conqueror in shock, unprepared, and forever changed by the revelation of what humans could truly achieve when underestimated. As the first ripple of human resistance spread to the outer colonies, Dominion intelligence networks scrambled to understand what was happening, their algorithms designed to detect threats failing to account for the unconventional patterns displayed by human fleets. Each engagement revealing layers of planning and foresight that alien commanders had assumed were impossible for a species so recently arrived on the interstellar stage. And while the Dominion scrambled, humans executed their plans with precision born of decades of preparation, from the orbital shipyards of Mars, where engineers synchronized construction schedules to maintain uninterrupted production of next-generation warships, to the data centers hidden beneath the surface of Ganymede, where analysts process terabytes of incoming sensor information to optimize fleet deployment. Every action interlinked, creating a network of operational superiority that functioned as a single organism with the intelligence, adaptability, an initiative of millions of human minds working in unison. And as Lieutenant Commander Morales coordinated the movement of decoy squadrons through asteroid fields and nebulae, she noted how alien pursuers fell into predictable traps, each feint, each diversion feeding the Chiron Protocol's predictive matrix, allowing real human forces to strike at vulnerable points with devastating accuracy. While on the diplomatic front, Ambassador Olivia Grant engaged in a parallel effort, communicating with sympathetic alien factions and trade partners to disrupt Dominion supply lines, providing cover for human maneuvers and sowing dissent among the enemy. The combination of military precision and psychological operations creating a pressure that the Dominion could not withstand. And as Dominion Admiral Sarnak watched his ships be outmaneuvered and his orders intercepted, he began to grasp the scope of humanity's hidden advantage, the realization that they were not merely reacting to tactics, but shaping the battlefield itself, bending enemy behavior to human design, a capability that no alien species had ever demonstrated on such a scale, and across multiple theaters of conflict, human intelligence operatives and cyber units infiltrated Dominion networks, deploying viruses and misinformation designed not just to disable equipment, but to manipulate decision-making processes, turning the enemy's own technology against them, while fleet captains such as Marcus Elliott and Tanya Ruiz executed precision strikes against high-value targets, cutting off reinforcements, isolating squadrons, and demonstrating that humans were capable of synchronized action across vast distances. Their ability to integrate real-time data with instinctive judgment, creating results that the Dominion had no framework to anticipate. And as the first major human-led offensive commenced in the Proxima Sector, the alien fleets encountered not just tactical superiority, but strategic foresight, with traps and contingencies anticipating their every move, each human commander empowered by neural interface connections that allowed instantaneous sharing of insights, from sensor readings to strategic adjustments, amplifying both creativity and decisiveness, while Dr. Liu monitored the neural links, observing the network optimize itself in ways that were impossible to predict externally, a living, thinking organism composed of human mind spread across light years, functioning with both independence and cohesion. And as Dominion forces suffered repeated defeats, the Alien High Council convened in emergency sessions, debating whether the humans had access to technology far beyond anything known, whether their fleet strength had been underestimated, and whether there was some unknown alliance or weapon that gave them this uncanny edge. Yet every inquiry led to the same conclusion. Humans acted in ways that defied expectation, their unpredictability and ingenuity, turning every attack into a failure for the enemy. And as civilian populations on human-controlled planets witnessed the initial victories, morale surged, creating a collective confidence that rippled through fleets and colonies alike, the determination and courage of individuals translating directly into tactical advantage. While Dominion propaganda struggled to maintain a facade of control, reports of human brilliance spreading faster than they could suppress, further undermining confidence within their ranks. And as Harper reviewed the aftermath of the first major engagements, he realized that the initial strikes were only the beginning, that humanity's secret advantage lay not in a single weapon or fleet, but in the integrated system of intelligence, strategy, adaptability, and psychological insight that could outthink, outmaneuver, and ultimately outfight any opponent. And as the Dominion grappled with the unprecedented scale of human capability, humans continued to expand their influence subtly, securing star systems that had been previously ignored or deemed strategically unimportant, using each new acquisition to feed data into the Chiron Protocol, refine tactics, and extend their operational reach, while covert operations disrupted alien supply chains, communications, and morale, creating cascading effects that amplified the impact of even minor human interventions. And in the quiet moments between battles, human scientists and engineers continued to push boundaries, developing adaptive shields, energy-efficient drives, and advanced AI-assisted tactical systems that enhance decision-making while remaining unpredictable to alien observers, ensuring that each new encounter will be shaped by human ingenuity, not by the rigid doctrines of Dominion. And as Dominion analysts attempted to predict the next human move, they found themselves confounded at every turn. Every logical assumption challenged by creative solutions, deceptive maneuvers, and the relentless will of a species that refused to be intimidated or outpaced. And as Harper prepared the next phase of their campaign, the scope of humanity's plan became clear: a multi-system strategy that relied on anticipation, adaptation, and psychological leverage as much as firepower, demonstrating that humans had not only learned from the mistakes of the past, but had created a methodology that made them fundamentally unpredictable. And as the first reports of alien retreats and surrenders reached command centers across human space, the galaxy began to perceive the emerging truth that humanity's secret advantage, its combination of intellect, creativity, intuition, and technological integration, was not a weapon to be countered but a force to be reckoned with, one that would leave the Dominion and every other galactic power stunned. As the underestimated species from Earth revealed that their ingenuity and cohesion, honed over generations, could overcome the mightiest fleets and turn the tide of war, leaving the galaxy in a state of shock, unsure of how to respond, and forever aware that humanity was no longer be dismissed, that the secret advantage carefully cultivated in silence and preparation had now become the defining force in interstellar conflict, and that the coming campaigns would showcase the full scale of human capability, intelligence, and resilience, a revelation that would echo across the stars for generations to come. As the human offensive extended deeper into Dominion territory, the galaxy began to witness the full scope of what had been hidden for decades: a network of coordinated fleets, adaptive drones, and predictive command systems that allowed human forces to strike where and when the enemy least expected, with operations synchronized across multiple star systems, each maneuver feeding data into the Chiron protocol, which refined itself in real time, anticipating Dominion reactions, predicting strategies, and exploiting weaknesses that no alien species had ever anticipated. And while Admiral Sarnak scrambled to reorganize his scattered forces, human commanders like Harper, Morales, and Elliot orchestrated multi-pronged assaults with precision, using deceptive formations, simulated retreats, and feigned vulnerabilities to lure the enemy into traps that annihilated squadrons without exposing humans to risk. And on the industrial world of Earth and Mars, the production of next generation ships and adaptive munitions continued uninterrupted, coordinated by AI systems linked to human neural interfaces, allowing commanders to adjust tactics dynamically while fleets executed complex maneuvers across light years, simultaneously engaging in electronic warfare to jam communications, scramble sensor arrays, and manipulate alien perceptions of battlefield conditions, while human diplomats and intelligence operatives infiltrated Dominion networks, subtly sowing mistrust among high-ranking officers, leaking false information, and creating cascading confusion, all orchestrated to amplify the effectiveness of tactical operations. And as Dominion forces were drawn into carefully prepared kill zones in the Proxima and Centauri sectors, human strategists observed the unfolding chaos, their predictive models confirming the efficacy of their approach, demonstrating that human ingenuity, flexibility, and foresight could compensate for numerical inferiority, turning every engagement into a study of alien weaknesses and human advantage. And while the Dominion attempted to regroup, they discovered that their standard doctrines were no longer effective, their rigid command structures unable to respond to a fluid, adaptive adversary that anticipated every predictable action. And as Harper coordinated with Captain Kim's fleet maneuvering through dense asteroid fields to ambush enemy reinforcements, he marveled at how the integration of human intuition, AI analysis, and real-time communication had created an operational synergy unmatched in galactic history, each ship acting with autonomous precision while remaining fully synchronized with a larger strategy. And on the scientific front, Dr. Liu's team continued to refine the neural interface, increasing speed and responsiveness, allowing human commanders to share not just strategic plans but tactical instincts, transforming individual brilliance into collective action, while intelligence reports from Dominion worlds detail confusion, panic, and unexpected retreats. Alien officers unsure how a species so young in interstellar terms could consistently outmaneuver them, and across multiple human-controlled systems. Morale soared as victories accumulated, civilian populations unknowingly contributing to logistics, communications, and intelligence networks, their efforts creating an unseen foundation that amplified the effectiveness of frontline forces, while Dominion propaganda faltered, unable to account for humans' apparent omnipresence and predictive capability. And as Harper prepared the next series of coordinated strikes, he knew that the secret advantage lay not in weapons alone, but in the human mind itself, in creativity, adaptability, and a capacity for rapid learning, a force no algorithm or rigid doctrine could counter. And as Dominion analysts examined patterns of human fleet behavior, they noted anomalies at every scale, formations that appear to anticipate, enemy movements, feints that seem impossible to predict, and decoy operations that confounded sensor readings, all of which fed back into the Chiron protocol, amplifying its predictive capacity, while human drone fleets infiltrated Dominion sectors, creating false signals, simulated attacks, and diversionary engagements that spread confusion, disrupted supply chains, and forced alien forces into reactive patterns, each reaction carefully predicted and exploited, demonstrating that human strategic thinking could reshape entire battle spaces without direct confrontation. And on the frontier worlds, colonists observed the first signs of Dominion retreats, their relief tempered by the knowledge that human fleets continue to push forward with relentless precision, maintaining pressure while gathering intelligence and preparing for the next stage, the combination of operational, technological, and psychological warfare creating an unprecedented force that left the galaxy in awe. And as Harper looked out across the bridge of the Intrepid, the glowing Starline stretching into Dominion space, he realized that the success of the campaign was not just in defeating enemy fleets, but in demonstrating a new paradigm of warfare, one that relied on prediction, coordination, deception, and adaptability. And as Dominion leaders grappled with the reality of repeated failures, they began to comprehend that humans were not merely a military opponent, but an entirely new kind of adversary, one that operated on principles they could not understand, whose secret advantage, creativity, intuition, and the integration of mind, machine, and strategy was reshaping the rules of engagement, leaving the Dominion and the galaxy at large in shock, as humans revealed that their greatest weapon was not firepower or numbers, but the unpredictable brilliance of a species that had long been underestimated. And as skirmishes continued across multiple sectors, each engagement reinforcing the inevitability of human superiority, the galaxy began to perceive a fundamental shift, the rise of a force capable of rewriting the balance of power, demonstrating that humanity's secret advantage, cultivated in secrecy and honed over decades, was now fully unleashed, reshaping interstellar warfare and leaving every observer, ally, and enemy to confront the undeniable reality that Earth had become a force that could not be ignored, a species whose ingenuity, adaptability, and collective intelligence would define the future of the stars. As the Dominion's outer defenses began to collapse under the relentless pressure of human operations, the true psychological weight of humanity's strategy started to take effect, spreading uncertainty through alien command structures that had once prided themselves on absolute control. For every countermeasure they deployed was met with a response that anticipated it. Every reinforcement rerouted only to find human task groups already positioned to intercept, and every attempt at large-scale fleet concentration disrupted by precision strikes that shattered cohesion before full formations could assemble. And within the high council chambers of the Dominion capital, arguments erupted among senior strategists who could no longer agree on how to classify the human threat, some insisting it was a product of hidden superweapons, others fearing an unseen alliance. Yet the data revealed no such thing, only a single species executing warfare with a level of foresight and coordination that exceeded anything in recorded history. And while confusion spread among the aliens, human leadership remained calm and methodical, Admiral Harper and his counterparts across the fleet network reviewing probabilities, adjusting operational goals, and pushing deeper into contested regions, not with reckless aggression, but with carefully measured advances designed to stretch enemy logistics, fracture their command chains, and exhaust their capacity to respond, while the Chiron Protocol refined itself with every exchange, modeling not just ship movements, but the emotional and political reactions of Dominion leaders, predicting how fear, pride, and internal rivalry would influence their decisions. And as these predictions proved accurate time and again, confidence in the system grew, reinforcing belief that humanity's secret advantage lay in understanding the enemy better than they understood themselves. And on the front lines, captains like Marcus Elliott and Tana Ruiz coordinated joint operations with unprecedented synchronization, their ships maneuvering through hostile space as if guided by a single mind, executing complex three-dimensional battle patterns that funneled alien forces into overlapping fields of fire, disabled key vessels with precision targeting, and withdrew before counterattacks could be organized, while electronic warfare units flooded Dominion networks with conflicting sensor data and forged command signals, causing entire squadrons to hesitate or misalign at critical moments, hesitation that proved fatal when human strike wings emerged from unexpected vectors. And in the aftermath of each engagement, recovery teams collected vast amounts of telemetry, feeding it back into the strategic network to further enhance predictive accuracy, turning every victory into a foundation for the next, while deep within human research facilities, scientists monitored stress patterns, reaction times, and decision cycles of commanders through the neural interface, fine-tuning the system to reduce cognitive overload and preserve clarity under pressure, ensuring that human leaders could sustain the tempo of operations without fatigue degrading performance. And as these refinements took hold, the speed of human response increased even further, compressing decision cycles to a point where Dominion commanders found themselves reacting to outcomes rather than initiating actions, perpetually a step behind an adversary that seemed to see the future before it unfolded. And across occupied systems, local alien governors reported rising unrest as supply shortages, disrupted communications, and a visible failure of Dominion fleets eroded confidence in imperial authority, with some worlds quietly opening channels to human diplomats, seeking assurances of protection or neutrality, moves that further destabilized the Dominion's strategic position and validated the human approach of combining military pressure with political and psychological leverage. And as Harper reviewed these developments, he recognized that the campaign was entering a decisive phase, one in which the enemy's structural weaknesses were being exposed as thoroughly as their tactical ones. For an empire built on rigid hierarchy and unchallenged superiority could not easily adapt to a foe that thrived on flexibility, initiative, and decentralized decision-making. And as human forces advanced, they deliberately avoided annihilating every opponent, instead allowing select units to retreat and spread accounts of defeat, confusion, and the uncanny effectiveness of human tactics, stories that traveled faster than any official report and undermined morale across the Dominion, planting doubt in the minds of officers and crew who had once believed themselves invincible. And in this way, humanity's secret advantage manifested not just in battlefield success, but in the erosion of the enemy's confidence, the slow unraveling of their certainty that the galaxy belonged to them. And as more systems fell under human influence or withdrew from Dominion control, the strategic map began to shift, revealing the emergence of a new power whose strength lay not only in technology or numbers, but in the seamless integration of intelligence, adaptability, and the indomitable will to learn, to anticipate, and to act with precision, a combination that left even the most experienced alien commanders struggling to comprehend how a species they had once dismissed could now dictate the course of an interstellar war. And as the stars themselves seemed to bear witness to this transformation, the realization spread through corridors of power across the galaxy that humanity's rise was not a temporary anomaly, but the beginning of a new era, one in which the balance of power will be shaped by those who could think, adapt, and innovate faster than their rivals. And in that dawning awareness, the shock that rippled through the Dominion and beyond grew ever deeper. For it was no longer a question of whether humans possess a secret advantage, but how any force could hope to counter a species whose greatest weapon was the collective brilliance and resilience of its mind. As the Dominion's strategic depth eroded and once secure core systems began to feel the pressure of human encroachment, panic finally reached levels that could no longer be concealed by official communiques or rigid discipline. And within the vast halls of the High Council, where alien leaders had once spoken with absolute certainty about their manifest right to rule the stars, voices now wavered with doubt, their debates marked by fear that the humans were not merely winning battles, but dismantling the very foundations of Dominion power. For every loss revealed a pattern, and every pattern pointed back to the same unsettling truth, that human commanders were not fighting by inherited doctrine, but by constant adaptation, learning faster than any centralized alien intelligence could respond. And while emergency measures were ordered, including the recall of distant fleets and the activation of reserve armadas that had not seen combat in generations, the logistics of such movements only created new vulnerabilities, which the Chiron Protocol identified almost instantly, mapping supply routes, predicting arrival windows, and calculating the psychological strain on crews suddenly thrust into a war they had been told could not be lost. And as Admiral Harper studied these projections, he authorized a campaign of precision disruption rather than total destruction, targeting fuel depots, communication relays, and command hubs with surgical strikes that left fleets intact but paralyzed, forcing Dominion officers to confront the terrifying reality of being surrounded by an enemy they could not locate, could not outthink, and could not escape, while across human space, training programs accelerated, integrating battlefield data directly into simulators that allowed new pilots and tacticians to experience the patterns of Dominion behavior as if they had lived the battles themselves, compressing years of combat learning into weeks, ensuring that the next wave of human officers would enter the war already understanding how their opponents thought, reacted, and failed. And on the frontier, Captain Rachel Kim's carrier group executed a series of deep penetration operations that demonstrated the maturity of human coordination, slipping past detection nets, deploying drone swarms that mimicked entire task forces, and drawing enemy formations into futile pursuits, while the real strike elements dismantled critical infrastructure, all without a single broadcast command. The neural link coordination allowing silent, instantaneous adjustments that left Dominion sensors flooded with contradictory signals. And as reports of these operations filtered back to the alien capitals, the myth of human inferiority finally collapsed, replaced by a growing dread that the species from Earth had achieved something no civilization before them had managed. The unification of technological precision with emotional intelligence, strategic foresight, and an almost instinctive grasp of how opponents would respond under pressure. And in the midst of this unraveling, dissent began to surface within the Dominion itself, junior officers questioning the wisdom of orders that led predictable traps, planetary governors demanding resources that could no longer be spared, and rival factions within the Council accusing one another of incompetence. Fractures that human intelligence units carefully widened through subtle misinformation and psychological operations, not to provoke open rebellion yet, but to weaken cohesion and slow decision-making at the highest levels. And as these internal stresses mounted, Harper and his fellow commanders prepared for the next phase, one that would force the Dominion into a choice between overcommitment and retreat, both outcomes addicted to accelerate the collapse of their strategic posture. And while the galaxy watched in stunned silence, trade routes shifting, neutral powers reevaluating, alliances and minor civilizations quietly aligning themselves with the emerging human sphere of influence, the deeper implication became clear that humanity's secret advantage was no longer secret at all, but visible, undeniable force reshaping interstellar politics and warfare, proving that a species defined by adaptability, cooperation, and a relentless drive to understand could overcome empires built on tradition, hierarchy, and assumed superiority. And as the stars bore witness to this transformation, the sense of shock gave way to a dawning realization across countless worlds that the era of human underestimation had ended forever, replaced by the rise of a power whose true strength lay not in any single weapon or fleet, but in the collective mind of civilization that learned, evolved, and anticipated faster than any rival, turning the vast, cold expanse of space into a stage upon which the consequences of that brilliance were now unfolding. As the Dominion's emergency armadas finally converged near their inner defensive ring, the clash that followed revealed just how deeply humanity's methods had penetrated every layer of alien planning. For the humans did not meet the mass fleets with a single decisive battle, as tradition dictated, but instead fractured the confrontation into dozens of interlinked engagements, each carefully shaped by predictive modeling and psychological pressure, drawing segments of the enemy force into separate zones where terrain, sensor interference, and timing strip away their numerical advantage. And as Dominion admirals attempted to reassert centralized control, they found their communications degraded, their subordinate commanders receiving conflicting data and acting on outdated assumptions, while human task groups maneuver with fluid coordination, exploiting every hesitation, every misalignment, every moment of uncertainty. And within these shifting battlefields, pilots and captains acted with a level of autonomy that would have been unthinkable in the rigid Dominion hierarchy, making rapid decisions informed by shared situational awareness rather than waiting for a distant authorization, a freedom of action that allowed them to seize fleeting opportunities and convert them into decisive blows. And as strike wings cut to the edges of alien formations, targeting command vessels and logistics carriers with precision, the psychological impact proved as devastating as the physical losses, for Dominion crews began to sense that they were being guided into defeat by an intelligence that understood their doctrine, their training, and even their fears, anticipating reactions before they occurred. And on the human side, the Neuralink command network absorbed the unfolding chaos, translating into clarity, allowing commanders like Harper and Morales to perceive the entire battle space as a living map of probabilities, adjusting plans in real time, reinforcing success and containing risk, while behind the front lines, analysts and scientists continue to refine the predictive models, integrating every sensor reading, every intercepted transmission, and every behavioral anomaly into the Chiron protocol, which now operated with a depth of understanding that bordered on prescience, not because it could see the future, but because it could model how sentient beings under pressure would choose, hesitate, and err, and as this advantage compounded, Dominion counterattacks lost coherence, squadrons arriving too late or in the wrong configuration, weapon systems tuned to counter threats that had already shifted, and defensive formations collapsing under the strain of trying to respond to multiple, simultaneous vectors of attack, while human forces maintained a steady operational tempo, neither rushing recklessly nor pausing long enough for the enemy to regroup. And in the aftermath of the first major encounters near the inner ring, the scale of the shift became undeniable. Entire alien task forces forced into retreat, not through overwhelming firepower alone, but through the systematic erosion of their ability to predict, coordinate, and believe in their own superiority. And as survivors carried their reports back to the Dominion core worlds, the narrative of invincibility finally shattered, replaced by accounts of an adversary that seemed to think faster, adapt faster, and strike with an uncanny sense of timing. And across the galaxy, observers took note, for the pattern was now clear. Humanity's secret advantage was not a single innovation, but a civilization-wide integration of knowledge, creativity, and will, a way of waging war that transformed uncertainty into a weapon and turned anticipation into dominance. And as the campaign pressed closer to the hard Dominion space, the question that haunted every alien council chamber was no longer how to defeat the humans, but whether it was even possible. To counter a species whose greatest strength lay in its capacity to learn, to cooperate, and outpace every opponent not just in technology, but in understanding itself and others, a realization that deepened the shock spreading to the stars, as the full implications of humanity's rise began to sink in. As the war reached the threshold of the Dominion core, the final illusion of control collapsed within the alien leadership, for every strategic model they ran now showed the same outcome, a steady contraction of their influence and an accelerating loss of initiative. And in the chambers of the High Council, once filled with proclamations of inevitable victory, silence often fell as projections displayed human fleet movements that appeared almost calm in their certainty, advancing not in reckless waves, but in deliberate, synchronized arcs that enveloped key systems, isolating them and applying pressure with a patience that spoke of absolute confidence in the outcome. And while emergency edicts demanded total mobilization of remaining forces, the reality on the front lines told a different story. Dominion crews fatigued, confused, and increasingly doubtful of their command, facing an enemy that seemed to anticipate their maneuvers before orders were even issued. And in this atmosphere, human strategy shifted from probing and attrition to demonstration, not merely to defeat the Dominion, but to show the galaxy the full extent of their capability, orchestrating operations that combined overwhelming coordination with restraint, disabling fleets, capturing strategic nodes, and allowing transmissions of these events to spread unfiltered so that every observing power could witness the precision and control with which humanity now shaped the battle space. And at the Center of this effort, Admiral Harper and the Core Command Group authorized the activation of the deepest layers of the Chiron Protocol, integrating long-term political modeling with battlefield prediction, mapping not only how the remaining Dominion forces would fight, but how their leaders would think, argue, and ultimately decide, allowing human planners to craft a sequence of moves that would corner the Dominion into a position where continued resistance would be seen by their own people as futile. And as this plan unfolded, human fleets executed a series of synchronized strikes that neutralized key shipyards, command nexuses, and relay hubs within a narrow temporal window, the coordination so exact that even light-speed communication delays could not explain it to alien observers, giving rise to the chilling belief that the humans were somehow acting outside the normal constraints of time and space, when in truth it was a product of anticipation, preparation, and a unified decision network that allowed thousands of minds to act as one. And as Dominion admirals attempted to rally their remaining forces for a final stand, they found their formations fragmented, their supply lines severed, and their crews demoralized by the knowledge that every previous attempt to surprise or overwhelm the humans had ended in failure. While on human worlds, the scale of what had been achieved began to sink in not as triumphal arrogance, but as a quiet, collective understanding that their civilization had crossed a threshold, proving that cooperation, adaptability, and foresight could elevate them from a dismissed newcomer to a defining power of the galaxy. And across neutral and allied systems, leaders watched the unfolding events with a mix of awe and apprehension, realizing that the balance of power had shifted irreversibly, and that the species once considered insignificant now possessed a means to shape interstellar order, not through brute domination alone, but through an unmatched ability to understand, predict, and guide the course of conflict. And as the Dominion's core defenses weakened and their political unity frayed, the stage was set for the final reckoning, one that would not only decide the fate of an empire, but confirm beyond all doubt that humanity's secret advantage, the integration of mind, machine, and collective will, had transformed him into a force the galaxy could no longer ignore, leaving every observer to confront the reality that a new era was about to begin, defined by a species whose greatest weapon was its capacity to think together, adapt together, and act with unity and precision that no rival civilization had ever achieved. The final convergence unfolded not as a cataclysmic clash of annihilation, but as an inescapable tightening of circumstance, a strategic noose drawn so precisely that the Dominion's remaining fleets and political leadership found themselves cornered by their own exhaustion, fractured command, and the undeniable evidence of human superiority in foresight and coordination. For every possible avenue of counterattack had already been modeled, every desperate gambit anticipated, and every path of retreat mapped and sealed by task groups that arrived exactly where probability said they would be needed, and within the great council chamber of the Dominion capital. The surviving admirals and governors watched real-time projections that showed human formations holding key systems, controlling flow of energy, information, and trade, not through brute occupation, but through position and influence. Their ships arranged like pieces on a vast three-dimensional board where every move had been calculated many steps in advance. And as the final emergency session descended into bitter silence, the truth became impossible to deny that continued resistance would only deepen losses without altering the outcome, because the humans were not merely winning battles. They were shaping the future state of the war itself, guiding it toward conclusions already foreseen. And when the order to open channels was finally given, it was not issued in defeat alone, but in awe for the Dominion. Leadership understood that they were facing a form of strategic consciousness unlike anything their civilization had ever encountered, a collective intelligence that fused human intuition, emotional understanding, creativity, and machine precision into a single, adaptive will. And as the first formal transmissions reached Admiral Harper's command network, he and his fellow leaders did not respond with triumphalism, but with the same calm, measured clarity that had guided the entire campaign, laying out terms that reflected not vengeance but certainty, terms grounded in the knowledge that the balance of power had already shifted and that stability now required acknowledgement of that reality. And across the galaxy, neutral powers, minor states, and ancient empires alike listened as the news spread that the Dominion had yielded, not to a mysterious superweapon or an overwhelming numerical tide, but to a species that had learned to think faster, coordinate deeper, and adapt more completely than any rival. And in research stations, academies, and military colleges on countless worlds, analysts began to study the human approach, seeking to understand how a civilization once dismissed as primitive had achieved such dominance. And the conclusion they reached again and again was that humanity's secret advantage had never been a single invention, fleet, or algorithm, but the integration of many minds into a unified learning system, a culture that valued initiative, questioned assumptions, and embraced change, allowing it to evolve its strategies even as conflict unfolded. And on Earth, Mars, and the scattered colonies, there was no grand celebration, only a quiet recognition that their species had crossed a threshold, that they had proven not only their ability to survive among the stars, but to shape their destiny there. And as the fleet stood down and diplomatic frameworks began to form around the new reality, the broader galaxy slowly absorbed a lesson that would echo for generations, that underestimating humanity had been the greatest miscalculation of an age, because their true strength was not in what they built, but in how they thought, how they learned, and how they united. And in that understanding, a new era dawned, one defined by the knowledge that the humans, once overlooked and underestimated, had revealed a secret advantage that left the galaxy in shock and forever changed the balance of power among the stars.